Marvin is an expert from CRIF Dun& and Bradstreet, Philippines. He currently serves as the Senior Business Development Manager for CRIF DNB. Marvin will be talking to us about the challenges that procurement professionals are facing on this 2021, as well as some of the insights, experiences, and expertise that CRIF Dun& and Bradstreet can deliver to help them manage these challenges. Hi, Marvin, and thank you for joining us.
Yep. Thank you very much, Arden. First of all, good afternoon to all our attendees, esteemed guests, and to my fellow speakers. Again, I'm Marvin Larilla, Senior Manager for Business Development for CRIF Dun& and Bradstreet. And basically today I would be discussing our findings in the recent survey that Dun& Bradstreet did last December 2020, which talks about key priorities, challenges, and methodologies of assessing risk of procurement and supply chain leaders across the globe. And of course, I'll try to correlate this to in the local setting based on our experience. So the events of 2020 unleashed dramatic and unexpected disruption across the business supply chains all around the world, and including Philippines, of course. And with so many significant yet varied impacts, we surveyed more than 1,000 procurement and supply chain professionals from different industries across the world to understand deeper their thoughts and actions to cope up in the new normal. So let me start by sharing high-level statistics and summary of our findings in this survey, which might be helpful to our audience today as you align with your existing organizational goals and priorities. And based from our findings, of course, 99% of respondents believe that COVID-19 related economic disruption impacted their procurement operations. The nature of these impacts varied. Now, impacts may be good to some sectors, while other sectors were heavily hit, including their vendors and suppliers serving those industries. 40% have increased, or 40% of our respondents have increased their collaboration with other business functions. So I guess this is an immediate reaction by most organizations, since old strategies might no longer be effective in this pandemic. Thus, more collaborations, brainstorming activities, business reviews arise. And 7% of our respondents here made their operations leaner. And we've seen that also across in the local economy. And 36% of our respondents negotiated or renegotiated existing agreements with suppliers. Now, we've seen in the local setting, some businesses became more lenient in terms of payment and collection with the support of our government, such as Bayanihan Act initiatives. Now, despite these challenges, it is evident that 37% of our respondents, supply chain management organizations, have reacted by pursuing digital transformation initiatives, which includes improving data quality, particularly supplier data. Most delve on key processes and trying to adapt to the new normal, such as virtual ocular inspections, e-signatures for contracts, and even having smart alerts using their platforms. Some are looking for ways to access data on a real-time basis, such as supplier profiles, trade performances, and past transactions. Some initiatives include data sharing across organizations, so from a decentralized approach to a more centralized approach. And of course, creating actionable insights from existing data. Part of the study is that we asked what are the key priorities in 2021 of procurement and supply chain professionals. With COVID-19 shifting the way risk is managed and businesses move forward, it's important to consider both the short and the long-term objectives of procurement and supply chain professionals. And from these findings, as you see on the screen now, we can see how highly organizations are prioritizing technology and digital transformation when it comes to helping them evolve and plan how best weather the COVID-19 economic downturn. In other markets, the cited concern among leaders is mitigating financial risk. And as you notice, there is a common theme in the answers of our respondents. Number one is transforming the business and processes to digital space and adapting new technologies such as automation, machine learning, smart platforms that can predict risks and create actionable insights and real-time data delivery. And number two, of course, improving the bottom line in order to sustain the business, which includes mitigating financial risk exposures. Now, narrowing in on the concerns and priorities of procurement and supply chain leaders in the short-term perspective, so that would be over the next 6 months. As you see, the priorities don't hugely shift. Supply chain professionals' top three priorities are to better monitor their supplier performance, followed by more extensive use of new technologies such as AI and robotic or RPA to achieve supply chain insights and improve operational efficiency. In our experience, buyers do annual reviews with their existing suppliers, but after the pandemic, it triggered them to have more visibility, to have more visibility. And you want to understand the effects of the pandemic to your suppliers, of course. They may be greatly impacted, where let's say one of their key customers shut operations or slowed down, and this might lead to capital deficiencies, and in turn might affect you directly or indirectly. So risk might be higher now compared to pre-pandemic. Now, when it comes to how procurement and supply chain professionals plan to improve the management of their operations for the whole 2021, better management of expenses and improving working capital is the most cited priority. The second is building a more resilient supplier network. So 41% of our respondents answered that. And lastly, it was evident that data management initiatives are a top priority, where 40% of our respondents answer. The rest of the population we surveyed look at their core supply chain operations and employees. Now, the answers varied depending on the industries which are strong or weak during this pandemic situation. So part of the study that we did is to look at the key concerns for 2021. And even with the brighter prospects during or due to the vaccine rollouts across the globe, business still have their fair share of concerns. And for procurement and supply chain leaders, among those worries are the increasing scale and complexity of globalization. So that is the highest concern based on this study. Not to mention, of course, we're with the recent global shipping container shortages as well. Now, 68% of our respondents mentioned that the pace of regulatory change is also a key concern. Now, for the local perspective, if you manage suppliers from different parts of the world, then you need to be updated on what's happening in that region, including regulations. Now, this is followed closely by cybersecurity risks, which I believe supplier professionals have been preparing since pre-pandemic. Now, while it's encouraging that the COVID-19 isn't dominating in the near future overall, but for most companies of respondents who reported being very concerned about about business recovery, COVID-19 still remains one of the highest concern among the respondents. Now, I wanted to laser focus on the last two concerns mentioned by our respondents in this study, wherein monitoring ongoing supplier risks and conducting supplier due diligence, which we believe that supplier professionals can control better. And we, CRIF, Dun & Bradstreet, would be able to support organizations by looking at key components such as supplier data management and also supplier risk management. So managing supplier data is really a growing concern into an increasingly complex challenge for organizations. Almost all procurement professionals we surveyed struggle with some area of their supplier data management. And the common scenario here is that procurement teams often manage vendor records in multiple systems and make manual updates, which can create both data quality and reporting issues. Now, staying on top of changes to supplier data requires sophisticated data governance practices, as well as right technology to support multiple regions and systems where applicable. And as you see on this slide, these are the common challenges mentioned by our respondents. And I guess these are also relatable to most of us in the local setting. So talking about more on risk management, supply management organizations typically use a standard set of controls or assessments to evaluate vendors and suppliers. Of organizations responding to the survey, between 30% and 40% use at least one control or assessment. And we've seen the most common ones were assessing the supply chain. 38% of our respondents answered that. Next would be compliance, or probably following regulations, local regulations. That's 34% of our respondents answer that. Cyber and IT security, which is also 35%, which is, again, a growing concern even before the pandemic. As we understand the respondents more firms use third-party data in their supplier assessments and are more focused on understanding how their vendors are linked to each other. So they are also more likely to evaluate the environmental, social, and governance activities of suppliers and use standard cyber risk ratings when assessing supplier cybersecurity readiness. These are all likely linked to greater public scrutiny faced by larger organizations and to manage reputational risks, which leads them to feel it necessary to assess their suppliers beyond the standard requirements. Now, in the Philippines, I guess the most common controls that we see are those looking at the financial aspect as well as the supply chain or the main operations of the vendor or your partner. And in more regulated industries like the BFSI sector, it is important to them to look at compliance, IT security, and even BCP policies. A few look at the ESG, or I should say environmental, social, and governance activities at this point. But I guess it is more for the companies, or companies would incorporate this control in the future as we become more aware of the effects of harmful environmental practices. Also focusing on risk management. So when we looked at the methods used to support supplier risk assessments, it's a positive sign that almost all organizations responding to the survey now carry out some form of supplier risk assessment. In more matured markets, many organizations now employ AI and automation or the continuous monitoring of the supplier's risk impact to proactively gauge the level of risk posed by their suppliers. This ongoing practice is very vital to your operations. Failing to regularly monitor supplier risk levels may lead to organizations being exposed to, of course, unknown or unforeseen threats. Multinational companies conduct supplier ranking on a quarterly basis, assessing each supplier's performance, where the best supplier, of course, gets more business the following quarter. It's best to have multiple suppliers to reduce risks of non-performance. So with the COVID-19 impact, I guess it is also best to look at suppliers locally because, of course, there's a lot of risks if you just have a supplier outside the country, with all those unforeseen risks at this point. Another element of risk assessment is the use of third-party data for verification. And based on our survey, 37% use. And I believe there is an opportunity here to improve, similar to the Philippine setting. And we've seen organizations use our reports upon onboarding. However, there are no monitoring activities followed. A less reliable method of risk assessment is using supplier self-assessment questionnaires. So something, 39% of our respondents still rely on. And I guess this is the reality in the local setting as well. On the other side of the scale, on-site visits give organizations the ability to more closely scrutinize their suppliers and is what larger firms are closely doing. But with the pandemic, I guess, what you can do is doing virtual ocular inspections, having a catch up with your supplier, and then, looking at, how their operations work from time to time. So what I'm showing in the screen right now is a sample of our reports. And as mentioned, some of the respondents in the survey are customers of ours. Thus, I'd like to briefly share how our business information report looks like and how this can help you and provide a holistic view of a third party, such as a vendor or supplier. Now, what I'm showing you here is just a summary, but usually our reports can be as long as 10 to 15 pages. And the summary gives you already the firmographic data, risk scores, and ratings, which is following global standards and acceptable globally. Now, financial highlights of the business and even key ratios are there, which would help you to make a more informed decision and complement your existing evaluation criteria. We also have online portals. It's being mentioned across this session, which we call VIA, which is a vendor pre-qualification platform. And in case you want to move from a spreadsheet type of recording and monitoring suppliers to a more sophisticated and accessible by multiple users 24 by 7, you might want to review our platform. Our reports are embedded in that platform, which is VIA, providing you a more efficient manner also of conducting your assessments. Overall, the events of 2020 have forced firms and industries to forge new paths. But what's evident is that technology and data will be central to most solutions, whether they use automation to better handle supplier risk assessment or improve master data quality to speed up supplier onboarding. Furthermore, the people and culture of the organization plays still a critical role in adopting new technologies and use of data analytics to meet the changing demands. Reskilling and learning should be part of the plan for your employees, and of course, investments in IT infrastructure around new technologies are also required. I guess it's pretty normal, or it's a human nature whenever there's a change or a fear of change. Thank you once again, and magandang hapon sa lahat.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Marvin Lorilia from CRIF Dun& Bradstreet.